Right, let's try it. Here we go. And I think
1908 Christmas of 80.
we're on, I think.
My Christmas present.
Okay,
And it took me about 4 or 5 years.
welcome
actually
to
discover
Grace Baptist
this.
Church, the Adult One Bible Study. My name is Norm Ellis. Glad to have you with us online and here in the classroom. We're going to be in Genesis chapter 39. We'll look a little bit at 38 as well, but mainly 39. And our lesson is called Accused. And we're going to be looking at how Joseph ran through a time of temptation. He was tempted, verses 7 through 10. He was trapped, 11 through 16. And he showed himself trustworthy, 17 through 21. So I have a couple of things to put on the board. So just for a few moments, I'm going to turn my back to you. I know it's a bad faux pas for me to do that as a teacher, but I have to do that. So just be a couple moments while I write a couple of things on the board. I apologize for that. Running a little bit late today. How's everybody doing this week? Pretty good?
Yeah.
Good.
It's a good start to the week.
Good.
It's going to be good weather later.
Yeah, well, that's later is going to be a good thing. Yes, it's not today and tomorrow. I guess it's going to be rainy still.
Yep,
Where are we here?
not as hard as yesterday. Yesterday
Um,
was a horror.
pretty good yesterday.
Ah, there we go. Okay. And our main point today is going to be that pure living brings honor to God. And there's something else I got to put up here. Oh, there it is. All right. Well, let's begin with a word of prayer then. Heavenly Father, just praise you be with us. We studied your word today. Thank you so much for your word. It's such a blessing to us. It builds us up and instructs us, Lord, and sheds light on our path, Lord. Just thank you for that. Be with us as we go through this study where we talk about Joseph and the trial he had to go through. Lord, I pray that you be with those who are on their way here. You keep them safe as they're driving. Be with those who are ill right now and can't come because of that, and help them get better, Lord. Those who are grieving as well, heal their spirits, Lord. And those that are online, thank you for them being here. And I just pray that you'd be with us as we go through this material, and be with our associate pastor, Pastor Lee, in the next hour as he brings the message while our pastor is away. And just pray that you be with Pastor Matthew as he's fulfilling his Air Force military duty at McCord Air Force Base. Thank you for all you've done for us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right. So how you all doing? Good, I guess, right? Like I said. I'm good. Glad to hear that. So we're talking about Joseph, and we're talking about how the trials that he went through. Now, first of all, who is Joseph? Let's define our terms here. We talked about him last week a little bit, right? Remember when he ran afoul of his brothers? They thought he was bragging, and he says, it ain't bragging if it's going to come true. Of course, they didn't know at the time. He had some dreams, right? And he related those dreams to his brothers. Now, he was the favored son of Jacob, or Israel. And he loved him more than the rest of his kids. Why did he love him more than the rest of his sons? What was the reason, do you think? Recapping a little bit, I know.
Was it because of his wife?
Yes.
He loved her more.
Right. So consequently, yes, the children from her. Rachel was his first love, and she only had 2 children, I think, is a matter of record, and that would have been, of course, Joseph and then Benjamin.
He was much younger.
Yes, and she died right after Benjamin was born, so it was a bad situation there. But anyway, but Joseph was his favorite one, and to show that he loved him more than all the rest, as if this is not going to help poor Joseph in this situation, he gave him a special gift. What was that special gift? Remember that?
colorful coat.
Coat of many colors. Now, I didn't wear my coat of many colors. I wore my shirt of many colors last week, but not today. And it was to show that he had such love for him. Now, did that help him with his brothers? No, it didn't help him either that he also informed on them one time. He came back and gave a poor report on what his brothers were doing in the field. Remember that? And his brothers hated him. They hated him. So they saw him coming again and says, oh, here comes that dreamer. That guy who says we're going to bow down to him and we'll take care of him. We'll kill him. You know? But they didn't. They relented because of
Reuben.
Reuben. That's right. Reuben. And Reuben said, no, I don't think we should do that. And so Reuben went off to do something else, and he came back, and Joseph was gone. He's not in the pit anymore. And, we sold him to some traders, some Midianites, as they're going to Egypt. So we made some money on this deal and didn't have to kill him. Okay, well, all right, I'll go along with it. So they convinced their father that an animal had torn him to shreds. They showed him the coat of many colors ripped apart and with blood all over from a goat they spilled blood on. So that was a synopsis of where we are. Joseph went off into slavery. So that's the end of that, right? No. God has his hand on this man. You know, we're going to hear this again later on, but they meant it for evil, but God used it for good. We're going to see that here. And one of the ironies here is as they were plotting what they're going to do to Joseph, and he's sitting in that pit before they sold him, they're eating their meal and having a good old time, you know, not sharing with Joseph apparently. Later on, Joseph feeds them and the rest of the known world. It's exciting to see how God had his hand on this man, right? Why? Why do you think that is? Well, we're going to see some of the reasons why today. So, one of the things I love to do is go fishing. How many of you like to go fishing?
No.
Maybe? No, maybe not. Okay. Well, I'm going to pass these around. Let me see. How am I going to do this? Yeah, I'll just pass them around.
He's been hanging around his wife.
Here we go. There, just pass that around. Look at it and pass them around. Just a glimpse at some of these wonderful things I brought in. This is my visual aid. For those of you online, these are different fishing lures. Different fishing lures of various shapes, sizes, and colors. And it's kind of a fun. If you ever go fishing, you probably can relate to this. You just pass it all the way around here, and I'll collect them at the end here. There we go. Toss them in there again.
It's coming back at you.
Coming back at you. Yeah. Did you see? Now, this is one of my favorite ones. You didn't see this one. Pass this one around.
If they're biting, I like to fish, but not just stand there and cast it.
Yeah.
That's the one you gave me.
So what these things are interesting to fish. Why are they interesting to fish?
You want to catch different fish?
Because they're all bright and clear.
So if you were a fish and you're swimming right along and you see this thing, what do you think it's going to cause the fish to do, or we hope the fish will do?
Look up there and see what it is, and maybe
Let's go to
bite.
dinner.
Looks like something good. I had something shiny like that tasted really good just a little bit ago. I'm going to try another one.
I saw a really nice long worm yesterday. I said, that would be good for fishing.
Yeah.
Well, fishing lures kind of brings into light one of the things we're talking about today. When we talk about temptation. Temptation. Now, I am looking as I'm stalling for time here. Oh, here it is. All these different lures, okay? So the purpose of the lure is to tempt the fish to do what? Bite, and bite hard, because I want to hook them. I want to catch that fish really good so I can reel that fish in and enjoy that wonderful meat, whatever it is. Anyway, so the lures entice that fish to go after that bait and bite on that metal hook that they can't seem to determine. Many factors determine the lure that is the most effective. You saw several examples of different kind here, right? One of the most effective ones for fishing in the lakes around here, I found in the reservoirs especially, is something called a max wedding ring. And you put it with the blades that spin around. You put this wedding ring at the end of that, and all this flashing and green color or whatever it is, they can't resist it. It lures them right in, right? Anyway, but the purposes never change. You want to entice that fish to take it and get caught. Temptations may take different forms, but they're all designed to lead us to take the bait and to move away from God's ideal. That's what temptations do, right? So it's just a little glimpse into what temptation might be, something we can relate to a little bit there. If you've ever gone fishing, maybe not, right? Have you ever known someone who has done one of the following? Gone on a diet, overspent on something beyond their budget, maybe. Vented on social media, somebody who's procrastinated, somebody who's gossiped, maybe somebody who's shaded the truth, in other words, lied. Ever know anybody like that? I think all of us could probably say what? Yeah. Well, things like overeating, overspending, all these things that we talked about, along with speaking unkindly and truthfully, they all represent common temptations, like we talked about with the fishing lures, right? What are some other areas where people commonly face temptation that you know of? And I don't have the right answer here, it's discussion time.
What was the question?
What are some other areas where people commonly face temptation? We talked about some of them already. Overeating, overspending, saying something on social media they shouldn't have said.
Driving
Yeah.
more than
Driving, that's a good one. Yeah. Sometimes people drive in a bad manner, don't they?
Yeah.
They get tempted to do that because they're short on time, perhaps, or maybe they've had a bad day and they're going to yell at somebody, honk at somebody. But they fall into that temptation of anger, perhaps, too. What are some other things?
Take something out of order that you're not supposed to get the best or the good. Something I'm thinking of the grocery store.
I agree with you.
Oh, yeah.
In the grocery store, like, okay, you're not supposed to get that one.
I really shouldn't be eating this, Lord, but, I'll think about walking more. How about that? That wonderful cream eclairs, or what do they call those things? It was
Oh, yes.
chocolate eclairs with cream in them. Somebody told me what's actually inside of a Twinkie. And I said, you didn't need to tell me that. I didn't want to know that there's lard and sodium silver. I don't want to know that. It tastes good to me. Just be quiet.
Well, the eclairs won't last forever, but Twinkies do.
A moment on the lips, an eternity on the hips.
Yeah.
Over the lips, past the gums. Look out, stomach, here it comes.
Twinkies will bubble in outer space.
Yes.
Put them in a vacuum.
They do?
Yeah, all that stuff wants to go out.
Well, and the vacuum things like to dissipate out. You're right. So let's look at our intro paragraph. Now I got a copy of that for you online if you got my notes. It's on handout number 1, page 1 of handout number 1. And in the middle, sort of toward the top, it says intro paragraph. It says it's always good to do the right thing. And it's always right to do what is good. This may seem obvious, but we live in a world that often rejects these statements. People ask the question, if something feels good, then how could it be wrong? On the flip side, people often think that doing the right thing means depriving oneself of joy. Yes. If you eat this fruit, it'll make you wise. Anyway. The thinking is that doing what is good and what is right will get in the way of one's own desires and agenda. God's word tells us that he will honor those who do what is good and right. This truth is evidenced in the life of Joseph. So ask the questions, how does God honor those who live pure lives?
He gives them favor with their enemies. I know I see that throughout scripture.
Right.
Yeah, he'll give them favor.
Okay.
Even with their enemies.
Good. Anything else? Does God honor those who live pure lives? Now, like the world says, well, live life to the maximum, enjoy all these things, right?
Just do it.
But when you do those things, does your life actually get better? Probably not. Probably not. As a matter of fact, you probably regret many of those things later on. But if you don't do them, if you follow what God says, even in the situation where I've lived this life and I've never done these wonderful things that supposedly are out there, but God has honored my life in other ways. Sometimes things that aren't evident. Sometimes with a family that really is a close family with the Lord. Sometimes with things that you've been able to share with people that maybe a person wouldn't be able to share about Jesus, for instance. Other things like that. Anybody else got something to say?
Well, sometimes I know of people that have done the right thing for years, and it took a long time to see their reward, but
Yeah.
eventually I could see too what reward came
Mm-hmm.
from doing the right thing.
Exactly. So temptation surrounds us, doesn't it? All kinds of things lure us away from things, right? Oh, I forgot about that. Yes, I have some scriptures, and so I do need to see some people to read them because you guys get tired of hearing me all the time.
There's four, and there's four of us.
Well, there's at least four. What's that?
I take one.
Number one?
Yes.
Well,
Oh, there's maybe more than
I have a little bit more than that.
Uh-oh.
Whoa!
Yeah, don't lose one.
Would you like to do one of these?
Sure.
There we go. Actually, I'm going to give you these two small ones.
Okay, okay.
And oh, look at that! It turned out perfect that way.
Oh,
If somebody else comes in, you can share that one of yours. with
Oh,
me.
yes. I would.
It is.
All right.
I don't know, let's measure it.
All right. So thank you for reminding me, David, about that. I would have been later going,
David.
God, I forgot again. But anyway, going back to what I was saying, temptation is all around us, right? There's all kinds of things that try to lure us away from doing what God wants us to do. In today's session, we're going to see how this man named Joseph determined to reject temptation despite the cost. And so let's look at the first one here. First of all, where are we on our materials here? We're with Joseph and his brothers. So if you look at the patriarchs, here's Joseph right here. And we're talking about how he saved the nation of Egypt. He saved not just Egypt, he saved Israel, he saved Mesopotamia, he saved all kinds of areas, the known world, because of what he did later on. We're going to see that before we finish with Joseph, I know. Not today. But he refused to take vengeance on his brothers, so another thing to remember there. And key moments in Jacob's life. We're on the last one here. No, not quite the last one there. We're in 39, so we're right between these two, where Rachel died in childbirth, and with Benjamin, and then Jacob moved with his family to Egypt. So we're right in between this spot right here on our list of things there. See anything else I'm forgetting? Oh yeah, Potiphar. Let's look at. I think does it come later? I think that's a good background to do now. I don't think it talks about it later. So one of the other handouts I have is about Potiphar. So if you look at handout number 2, it says Potiphar, all we know. So it's hard to maybe to read some of this. I apologize. It's the best copy I have of this. But it gives you all kinds of information about this man named Potiphar. He was instrumental in Joseph's life. He was one of the steps that led to Joseph doing what he did later on. So he's an important person. He was a dignitary in Egypt. He had some power there, apparently. It talks about that, what he had, if you read through here. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. Matter of fact, I'm going to let you read it later on, because we're going to run out of time. But his title was Captain of the Guard. It says this title is less certain. It says the root term means slaughter, thus the chief of slaughterer. Potiphar thus could have been the chief butcher or cook, but they don't think that's really true. It goes on to say later on that it really doesn't follow that he would be that particular thing. But he was a dignitary or a royal person. He had some status. So this is the person that bought Joseph. Another question that might come up is, how old was Joseph when all this happened? Do you know how old he was?
When he was taken? Or
Yeah, well, during this time we're talking about. Well, you probably would look at handout number 3, which I apologize to those who maybe got my handouts. I added this one late. The last handout, Joseph's age, some info about that. Joseph was 17 years old when he had his first 2 dreams. Remember those dreams?
Yeah.
That the sheaves bowed down to his sheaf. The stars and the moon and the sun all bowed down to him. So he had those 2 dreams. He was only 17. He was sold into slavery shortly after that, and ended up in Potiphar's household. So we don't know exactly how old he was, but he's probably around 18 or 19. That's a good guess. How long was he in Potiphar's house before this happened? We don't know. But probably around that age, 19, maybe 20. Then we see later on that Joseph says interpreted 2 dreams by the cupbearer, and one by the cupbearer, one by the baker. Remember that. And this was 2 years before Pharaoh's dream. And the cupbearer forgot about Joseph and left him in jail for those 2 years, which wasn't very good for Joseph, but it was according to God's plan. Because then somebody else had a dream, and that was Pharaoh. And he interpreted that for him when he was 28 years old. He was 30 then by the time he actually entered Pharaoh's service, apparently. And he then supervised the collection of grain during the 7 years of plenty. And then during the 7 years of famine, the second year, he met his brothers. He was presumably about 39 years old, they believe, according to Genesis 45:6. He died at 110 years old. Anyways, that's just a little thumbnail sketch about Joseph. I always wondered those things. How old was he when he did such and such? And so he was probably, when he went into Potiphar's employ, probably around 18. Be a good guess, somewhere around there. And we're going to see some other things about him in just a moment. Let's see. His brothers. Last week we talked about Joseph was sold into slavery. You know, that happened. And it says, is there anything about this whole situation before we get into the lesson that you wanted to ask about or that stood out to you about Joseph?
You know, there are some things that may have happened that's not written in the scriptures. But Joseph was very human too. He was as equally human as we are.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't say he got angry. It doesn't say he was frustrated.
How did he react to these things?
Yeah.
Was really the key, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We see that when Joseph came across these situations in life, did he blame God?
No.
No, he had that patience to say that God's going to take care of me. I'm in his hand. That's a really good philosophy of life, isn't it?
Yes.
And really, he tested his brothers before
Yes.
he would
had a little fun with
forgive
them.
It would be hard for me to forgive people that had sold me into slavery.
Sure would be. Sure would be. Yeah, and if we're honest, there's probably people right now we think about who've hurt us very deeply.
Yeah.
That right now we think about it, it's kind of hard to. If I was faced with a situation where they stood before me and I had all this power on them, would I crush them, or would I say, you know what, come back, I'm going to take you back. You know, human nature being what it is, it'd be hard to say. You know, I hope I do the right thing. I hope I be like Joseph. You know, is he a good example for us in our lives? Pretty much.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to talk about this one episode here with Joseph after he was sold into slavery. The last time we saw him, he was going off with the camels with the Midianites on that trail to Egypt. I don't know what's going to happen to him, but the brothers all thought what?
Yeah.
Good riddance. We never see you again. We're going to tell your daddy you're dead. That's what they thought. Little do they know, they're going to be standing before him and bowing down to him later and getting food from him. Okay, so tempted. Our first section is verses 7 through 10. Before we read those, because I always forget to do this, I would like to read a little bit of something else first. Actually, okay, there's in chapter 38, which is the previous chapter, we see an interesting thing happen in the life of one of Jacob's sons, Judah. And Judah, in 38:1, it says that it came about at that time that Judah departed from his brothers and visited a certain Adulamite whose name was Hira. Judah saw the daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua, and he took her and went into her. She conceived and bore a son, and he named him And then she conceived again and bore another son, named him Onan. Then she bore still another son, and named him Shelah. And it was at Cherub that she bore him. Now Judah took a wife for He in other words, he said, okay, my firstborn needs a wife. Took another probably Canaanite person. They're not saying for sure where it came from. But the person's name was Tamar. You probably heard that name before. But Judah's firstborn, did evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord took his life. So Tamar now is what? A widow. And what was the tradition in that day when that happened in a large family like this?
The brothers to take the the widow.
Yeah, one of the next eligible brother is to take that widow as wife and raise up children that would be an honor to that one that had departed. It was just a tradition of what they did. Did God tell them to do that? I'm not sure. And I can't remember that it being in the thing later on, but at this time it was like a tradition thing. So, did evil, just go to your brother's wife and perform your duty that you should do. And Onan knew that offspring would not be his. So when he went into his brother's wife, he did not do what he was supposed to do. Let's leave it at that. Because he didn't want an offspring for his brother, for whatever reason. But what he did was displeasing in the sight of the Lord. So he took his life as well. So now you've lost you lost Onan. And you got one left, Sheila. Okay, so then Judah said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, remain a widow in your father's house until my son Sheila grows up. Because he's probably just a little kid at this time, right? For he thought, I'm afraid that he too may die like his brothers. See, I see a pattern going here.
Yeah.
I've lost one, I've lost two, third one's left. So Tamar went and lived in her father's house, and now after a considerable time, Shua's daughter, the wife of Judah, died. Okay, so Judah's wife died. And when the time mourning ended, Judah went up to the sheep herders at Timnah, he and his friend Hira, the Adullamite. And it was told to Tamar, to say who told her, but somebody told her, says, behold, your father-in-law is going to Timnah to shear sheep. So she removed the widow's garment and covered herself with a veil, wrapped herself, and sat in the gateway of Enaman, which was on the road to Timnah. For she saw that Sheila had grown up and had not been given to him to her as wife, or as to be, she was supposed to be the wife of him. And so in other words, she knew what? Judah had reneged on what he was supposed to do. He was supposed to do this, and he did not do it. So when Judah saw her all dressed up like a prostitute, basically, as a harlot, she had covered her face with a veil, he turned aside to her at the road and said to her, basically, I'm going to summarize this. Let's do this thing, and I'll give you a goat later.
Yeah, that's about it.
So he did it, you know, and I need a pledge from you that you're going to actually come back with the goat. So your seal and your cord and your staff, you know, those are very personal things for a landowner to have, because you use them in your daily thing, those seals and things like that. So he did it. He gave it those things to her, thinking, well, I'll just send that goat, and then I'll get my stuff back when I send here. So later on, when Judah did send, by means of a friend, that young goat, they couldn't find her. Where's that temple prostitute, they said. There's no temple prostitute here. So the friend returned to Judah and says, I couldn't find her. Furthermore, the men of the place said, there's no temple prostitute here. Then Judah said, let her keep them. Otherwise, I will become a laughing stock. So he knows something here. What he did was what? Wrong. Judah did wrong. Mm-hmm. Judah succumbed to temptation. And he did this terrible thing. He went into a prostitute. So he did something that was morally not right.
Well, why were there temple prostitutes, really?
Because they were in the middle of a pagan area. They were all around them was the Canaanites and other groups, and they had different temples where part of the worship would be you consort with a prostitute. They had male and female prostitutes, by the way, in these temples. It was very, very bad. This is why God said, don't have anything to do with those people. Keep yourself separate. He knew that it would be a snare to them if they did that. Anyway, so he knows what he did is wrong. And so now he's told, hey, says, your daughter-in-law Tamar, she's been unfaithful. She's now pregnant 3 months. You think you'd be smart, you might think 3 months, that doesn't matter. But he didn't know that. So anyway, Judah said, bring her out and burn her, essentially. Burn her at the stake and put her in a pile of stuff for burning up. So then it says that they brought her out, and she said to Judah, I am with child by the man whose these things belong. Please examine them. Whose signet ring and cords and staff are these things? Judah recognized them, of course, immediately. And he said, she is more righteous than I, inasmuch I have not given her to my son Sheila. So basically, he recognized that he was a bad person. He did something that was bad. So anyway, we're going to contrast Joseph now to that brother Judah. That's what part of this lesson is involved. That's why I took a little time with that. Okay. So now we're going to be in 39. Jump into chapter 39 now. We finished 38. And the first few verses I'm going to go ahead and read before we hit the focal verses. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Remember, he had been sold into slavery, right? And Potiphar, an Egyptian officer of Pharaoh and captain of the bodyguard, that's his title. So we know he was involved with that, right? Bought him from the Ishmaelites or Midianites, same group, who had taken him down there. And the Lord was with Joseph, so he became a successful man. He was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. Now his master saw that the Lord was with him, and how the Lord caused all that he did to prosper in his hand. So this man Potiphar, we know something about him right here. He's smart, because he saw that Joseph is a key person in his household now. The God is on Joseph's side. He has favor with God. He's blessing him. So he's given him control, it says. So Joseph found favor in his sight, in Potiphar's sight, and became his personal servant, and he made him overseer over his whole house. And all that he owned, he put in charge of him. So think about this. Here's a person who's been sold into slavery. Now he's become what? Second in command almost of an Egyptian's household. That's pretty good. It came out at that time that he became overseer of his house, all he owned. And it says that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house on account of Joseph. So Potiphar was smart. He recognizes, right? Thus the Lord's blessing was upon all that he owned in the house and in the field. So he left everything he owned in Joseph's charge. So we know something about Potiphar. What did he did what about Joseph? He trusted Joseph. Exactly. And with him, there he did not concern himself with anything except the food that he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. Now remember, Joseph was about 19. And it says what else about that? He was handsome. In other words, he was a hunk. He was a good-looking guy, you know. So he was the prime of his life. So that's where we're at right here as we jump into our first one. So in these first 4 verses, I want you to listen to Joseph's dilemma that comes across to him in 7 through 10. Who has number 1?
Me.
Go for it.
And it came about after these events that his master's wife looked with desire at Joseph, and she said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Behold, with me here, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house, and he has put all that he owns in my charge. There is no one greater in this house than I, and he was withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great evil and sin against God?" As she spoke to Joseph day after day, he did not listen to her, to lie beside her or be with her.
So we see that Joseph has caught the attention of Potiphar's wife. We don't know Potiphar's wife's name, but apparently she wanted Joseph to lie with her. Now it doesn't say, the terminology is a little bit different in certain other things. Let's see, where was it I read that? Well, it's not here. But essentially it was to get him into the bed to begin with, and then after that progress to the next thing, probably. That's what they're saying. They were saying. And it uses a very interesting term here. In which verse was that?
I know it said that they didn't use the word lie with me. It was beside me.
Beside me, that's what it was, yeah. Oh, you found the reference. I knew it was in there somewhere,
Well,
yeah.
it's in here. I don't know where it is.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it is here.
Yeah,
I
it's slightly different, but
Yeah.
the idea was to get him into bed and then to go to the next thing after that. It's not in this verse, I don't think.
Well, Joseph,
Okay,
he knew what she was inferring. She said no. He said no. That
Oh, okay. Now, I can't see the verse where it says that.
Oh, it's on page 94,
Uh-huh.
where it says verse 10. It says the phrase to
That's
go
it.
to bed with her
Verse
literally
10.
means to lie beside her.
Right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's the part I was trying to find here. But there's also this term, her eyes were lifted up, and I can't find where that was on my my sheet here, but it's a similar to her eyes was lifted up when she saw Joseph. Okay. Similarly, we see Lot when he was given a choice of either the valley where Sodom and Gomorrah was, or the highlands up here where the things weren't as nice. Okay, that he saw and his eyes were lifted up to Sodom and Gomorrah. It was, in other words, he was attracted. The lure, the fishing lure, had flashed in front of his eyes.
Yeah.
And this was what's happening here. She was lured by this handsome young slave that she probably thought she could command to do whatever she wanted to do. Right? So it was the same kind of thing. So we see that the temptation enters through the eyes, you know, a lot of times. And that's what we see in this situation. And she wanted him to lie with her. What was Joseph's response?
Well, he denied her, and he voided her as he served Potiphar's house, and so she got tired of that, and she grabbed his coat. Am I getting ahead of
You're getting ahead of me.
Okay, all right. Stop at 10.
That's okay. But basically, she's trying to do what to him? Trying to wear him down. Does temptation do that to us too?
It can.
When we let temptation come into our, whatever it might be, we can be tempted a lot of things: power, money, material things, right? Physical things, like Joseph was, different things like that, right? And Joseph was a slave, and so she thought, I could command the slave to take care of my wants, my desires. And that's what she was trying to do there. And what would happen if Joseph had gone ahead and done that? What she wanted.
Well, he would have not pleased God, first of all.
There you go. But would he have necessarily been caught, perhaps? We don't know.
Maybe.
I don't think Potiphar
We're not sure. Yeah, it doesn't say.
Yeah.
But there's a chance, very good chance, it probably would have just been that type of thing, and because it was not an uncommon thing in pagan societies, because you didn't worry about that. But Joseph was not a pagan. Joseph was a God-fearer. We see that. We see that all through here.
At a very young age, he was already had true godliness in his heart.
Yeah.
It was
At a night, as probably around 19 years of age. I don't know exactly. Well, within a year or two, either way. That's what he was already deciding these things in his life.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know about you, but when I was that age, it was hard pressed to do that kind of a hard thinking to me. That comes more later on with wisdom, doesn't it? But Joseph was given this wisdom, I think, from God to say that these things I'm showing you, this is right, this is wrong, choose the right. And we see that he did that, didn't he?
And you know something else? There was no law of Moses at this time. So
Right.
It was just, because that proves that we have a sense of right and wrong. What the scripture said, God has put eternity in our hearts. All man, we know what's right and wrong. And Joseph was brought up in a godly home too, because his whole family, his father and mother feared God.
Yeah.
That helps.
Definitely helps. We see that Judah decided wrong, though. He didn't do what he should have done, the right things. Whereas Joseph, we're seeing, he's making correct decisions. We're going to maybe jump a few of these things down in a moment here. In the study course book, in pages 94 through 93, it talks about verses 7 through 10. But some of their places there, it shows some of the reasons why Joseph resisted Potiphar's wife. Obviously it's wrong, and he knows it's wrong morally, so he's not going to do it. But there's some specific things here that it talks about. And Joseph was a slave, right? Was it a correct thing for a slave to have relationships like this with people that he's not equal to, if you will? No.
Yep.
No, he should have done it for that reason alone, right?
well, it wasn't moral or good, but well, men primarily and women though would have relations with slaves because they could order them.
Yep, they could order them. And one of the things it says here, I underlined in these verses, is that doing what she wanted would have been an abuse of that trust that his master Potiphar had in him. And so that would be definitely a reason, right? Potiphar trusted me. I shouldn't shouldn't take that trust and throw it in the garbage.
That's
Yeah.
true.
That's a reason, okay. He realized that Potiphar was the master, and that's above me. And Potiphar did not give me permission to do those kind of things that she's trying to say. So it'd be he would consider it a sin against Potiphar, because she was off limits. Is there another thing here? Also, and this is something that's not directly said here, but it talks about this. The cultures in the Near East and other places, not just Israelites, believe that adultery was a sin. Now, what was it winked at sometimes? Yeah, it's a sin. I shouldn't do it, but we'll just do it this time. Do we see that today in our society as well? We do. People don't take their vows seriously, but it was still a sin. So this was something that culturally Joseph also knows he shouldn't do. But primarily, and I think somebody else said it here, was it David? I'm not sure. But Joseph saw that the person he needed to please was not Potiphar, not Potiphar's wife. It was his God. And that's the primary reason here, his devotion by God. He called it a wicked thing, a sin against God. It'd be a violation of God's established order. And not only for him, but for her as well. And it's an interesting thing to look at as well, that we should not do this wicked thing, or whatever the terminology was. But she still went after him over and over, it says, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, any comments or questions about that besides that? So, I should write this down. Okay, so what was Joseph's, some of the attributes here we're going to look at here. In Genesis chapter 38, we see important info related to Joseph's brother Judah. We talked about that already, right? While Joseph resisted temptation, what did Judah do?
Succumbed.
Succumbed or succumbed? I don't know how you pronounce that even.
Succumbed.
So I would say gave in, right?
Yeah.
Gave in to temptation. Whereas Joseph resisted it, right?
Ran.
Well, we're going to see that later.
Okay.
Resisted it. Okay, that's good. And don't forget that. If I forget it, you tell me. So because you keep doing that because you know what's coming up. I know. Another thing I forgot here. We see that Joseph was showing something else in this part here. He not only resisted the temptation, but he was showing integrity, right?
Yeah.
So are these things we should probably do too? Should we resist those kind of temptations?
Yeah.
For sure.
Should we show integrity at all times? Of course, of course. So Joseph, again, is a good example. Judah's not so good. Poor Judah, we're picking on him, I know. And so in Genesis chapter 8, we saw what Judah did. Joseph, though, resisted a similar thing. He resisted temptation. Judah slept with his daughter-in-law after he had broken a promise to her. And, of course, he didn't know it was his daughter-in-law. She fooled him, but he still did it. Let's look at the next part here then, unless somebody has another question or comment about that. Ooh, wow. Okay, go here. All right, next one is called trapped. We talked about tempted. Now let's look at trapped, verses 11 through 16. In the next 6 verses, I want you to note 3 things that trapped Joseph. 3 things. Now, we might find more than that, but let's see if we can find at least 3 things, right? Who has number 2? Go ahead and read that for us, please.
Now it happened one day that he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the household was in there. She caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." And he left his garment in her hand and fled and went outside. When he saw that he had left his garment in her hand and had fled outside, she called to the men of her household and said to them, "See, he has brought in a Hebrew to make us sport of us. He came in to lie with me, and I screamed. When he heard that I had raised my voice and screamed, he left his garment beside me and fled and went outside." So she left his garment beside her until his master came home.
Whoa, so we see a lot going on here. This is where the action's happening, apparently. So what 3 things trapped Joseph in these verses, do you think?
Well, being alone.
Oh, yes. I think I had that somewhere. Oh, maybe not. I know I read that somewhere. What are those three things? Hold on just a second. No, I'm not going to find it. Where is it? Oh, it's over here.
Her ungodliness, I mean, her lack of morals, I mean, she demanded what she wanted. And that
Yes. You know, and I wrote these things down, and now I'm not finding where I wrote them, so that's okay. But there was three specific areas. Oh, here it is. right there in my main notes, dum-dum. Okay, so he was the household servant or slave. He was in charge of things. He told people what to do, and they did it.
Charge of the house.
Right. So he's directed these people to go do those chores that they need to do and stuff, and so the house is empty, except for him and her. Okay? Because it says that none of the men in the household were inside. It doesn't say anything about the women, but we're assuming that that's the case as well. So the first thing that we see is that he was what?
Well, he was alone.
He was alone in an empty house with her, right?
Yeah.
And she was lying in wait for that time.
It says an item left behind.
Yeah.
This was not a spur of the moment thing for her.
No,
No.
not at all. So then the next thing is what? Next thing that happened for him, she said, okay, I'm going to bring you into the bed. You're not listening to me time after time after time. I'm going to pull you right into the bed with me. So he grabs a hold of her cloak, his cloak, and pulls him aside and demands that he lie with her. And now, he could have made a choice here. Well, I'm trapped. I'm the servant. I got a slave. I got to do that. But he didn't. He made a choice. He did what? Now you can say it. He fled immorality.
Yeah.
That's a good verse. And we're going to talk about that verse a little bit. Flee immorality, it says in the New Testament, I think.
Paul said, run.
That's right. Do not stop. Do not pass go. Do not collect 2,000. You leave. Get out. When these things happen, you flee.
Quick.
Yes, quickly. So that's what happened as well. And unfortunately, he left his garment behind because she had hold of it, right? And so she's going to get her revenge. She's been spurned by this slave. And I'm going to get my revenge. So she does what? She calls out.
Calls out
Calls,
and
yeah.
calls for the men to come
Made up
in
a story.
and had his coat. He left his coat. And here's the evidence.
Yeah. The picture is she's sitting there on the bed. She's got the cloak in her hand, and she's sitting there waiting until Potiphar comes home. Because I'm going to get this
Says
guy.
she screamed.
I'm going to get this guy. Yeah, first she screamed to make sure everybody could hear. And so that is kind of like, that's the stage that was set for when Potiphar comes home. But it's an interesting thing here. He says, see, she says, he, Potiphar, has brought in a Hebrew to us to make sport of us.
Yeah.
He came into me to lie with me, and I screamed. When he heard that I had raised my voice and screamed, he left the garment beside me and fled and went outside. It says, and so she left his garment beside her until his master came home. So the stage was set to get her revenge on this guy. But what's interesting is who does she blame?
Potiphar.
She blames Potiphar. Does this sound familiar? Blame shifting?
It's all your fault.
God, it wasn't me. It was that woman you gave me.
Oh, yes.
Remember that?
Yeah.
No, it was the snake.
And the woman said, it was a snake. You created that snake, you know that snake. And of course, they were all at fault in that situation. But we see blame shifting used a lot, don't we? Do we ever do blame shifting in our lives? Maybe especially when we're younger. Hopefully not today as we're older. Sometimes we do, right? You see kids do blame shifting? Oh, I see it a lot with my grandkids. They're sweet kids, by the way. But boy, oh boy, they're like any kid. They don't want to be held responsible for something they were doing wrong, you know. But that's a common thing. It's a human thing, right? And she's going to exact her revenge because she's got the stage set, and I'm going to get this guy. This guy should never have spurned me like he did. I'm going to take care of him. So the stage is.
I'm gonna protect myself.
That's probably a point too. She's saying I gotta make sure that everybody knows I didn't do anything
Because if he runs out and tells Potiphar what I did, I'm gonna make sure that.
Yep. Now you'd think this was brought up by somebody else once before. It doesn't tell us, but you think Potiphar probably had inclination that maybe it wasn't Joseph's fault?
I think he's, well, he knew his wife, and his wife knew her husband, and Joseph should have been killed. But they also,
He could have had her killed.
Yeah.
Potiphar could have had
Yeah,
Joseph killed. Yes.
but he didn't. But what the scripture says before was Potiphar liked Joseph. Joseph had favor with God,
Yeah.
and he knew that. And I think he probably knew things about his wife. Like this wasn't the first time something like
That's
this
what I
has
was
happened.
thinking.
Could be. We don't know. Again,
We
we can
don't.
surmise certain things, but we're right about the fact that Potiphar recognized that this man Joseph, God's hand was on him, and he probably, instead of having to kill, he said, "You know what, I'm going to put him in the
Prison,
royal
maybe you have
prison."
to get him out later.
Yeah. Now the prison he went to was not the run-of-the-mill prison. Just so you know, this is the prison that they send the high mucky mucks to. It'd be like we would call it the Club Med prison. I don't know if you're familiar with that term or not, but there's federal prisons, then there's federal prisons. And the Club Med ones are basically like a house arrest thing in a compound that's really nice.
Yeah.
And they have them for these people, and I don't know
For
if it's right or not.
senators and congressmen
Yeah,
and
yeah,
politicians.
Yeah, people like that. They go,
Martha Stewart.
yeah. But this was sort of like that. It was a place where the official baker, we found,
Yeah.
went to that prison. The official cupbearer went to that prison. Probably others as well. But that was so. But it was still prison. Don't misunderstand. It was still not a good place, and it was a bad thing for him to have to go there. But anyway, we're jumping ahead. We need to get back to our track here. So let me make sure I didn't miss anything here. He fled temptation. Okay, yes. So what did Joseph do? I just said it.
Fled.
He fled the temptation, right?
Hey, you ran away, so you must be guilty.
Oh, yeah. Leaving his coat behind.
Yeah, well, you gotta be guilty then.
Yeah.
What did Judah do?
Succumbed.
There's that word
Gave
again. How do you
in.
spell-
Gave in.
Gay. Oh, there I can't spell.
As you
Succumbed.
I know. I think there's a silent B in there or something. I can't. Gave in to temptation.
yes.
I don't know. Let's see what Dr. Google has to say.
Oh, now somebody's gonna look me up. I know.
Succumb. No, I'm doing this for my.
I think it's SCUMB, but I'm not
No.
sure.
No, there's no.
No,
B in
actually,
there.
I'm shocked.
There's no
it's
B in
not.
it.
There is a B.
Oh, there's
The
a
B's at the
Succumb.
very end.
Yeah,
It's
that's right.
SUCC
double C.
UMB.
See, I would have misspelled it. I would have put the
Well,
double
he
C.
did misspell integrity too.
Oh, don't. Integrity.
Integrity is right. It was
In. There's an N
Resist
missing. There's
was-
an N missing. Oh no, don't do that.
oh,
Ron.
in. It's all right. We all know what it means.
And there's an N
Actually,
in there now.
what you
You're right. I just skipped right over that one, didn't I? Thank you.
no,
Anyway, but we see that, right? Judah gave in to temptation. He turned aside to the prostitute. Joseph fled temptation. So a stark difference there, didn't it? Okay, you were going to say something else? I interrupted you.
well, I was going to say, if you're not sure about the spelling of it, the little parentheses just on the end of the word, write SP.
SP, that's right.
Spelling.
Spelling.
You're not
Spelling.
sure.
I'm
of
not
it.
sure of the spelling, but that's
There it
usually
is.
when you're quoting something verbatim from somebody.
It's still.
And you want to make sure everybody knows that they misspelled this.
No,
Oh, yeah.
Not me!
If you're not sure of the spelling of the word, you put SP.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter
Right.
where you're using it from.
Well, no, but I've seen it that way
Right.
before when people are quoting people. Yeah.
What have we descended into?
I don't know. Anyway, but we see that in contrast to Judah, that Joseph did the right thing. Of course, he fled that temptation. Right. Let's look at the last verses here. First of all, Joseph's commitment to flee temptation stands in stark contrast to Judah. Right. We are not called to stand and fight every temptation that comes along. Sometimes our best response is to remove ourselves from the situation, to run away from the temptation. For Joseph, that protected his integrity. His situation was about to get worse, but he still maintained his honor and his righteousness before God. Now, there's a term in the Bible, a term we use about the Bible. it talks about when you're going in this direction and you stop, you turn around, and you go the other way. And it's repenting. It is actually comes from a military term, I was told. It means to about face and go the other way. And so that's basically what he did. He about faced and went the other way, only he went with lots of speed. He wanted to get away from this person, right? So he protected his integrity. And that was neat. And so it says his situation was about to get worse, but he still maintained his honor and his righteousness before God. Look to the last point now. We talked about already tempted and trapped and trustworthy, and now we're out of time. Sorry, no, we're going to still do it. The last one is trustworthy. These last 5 verses, I want you to listen for the consequences Joseph faced and how he handled them. Number 3. Who's got number 3? Anybody?
That would be me.
You got number 3? Okay, go ahead.
Then she spoke to him in these words.
To Potiphar.
Yes. The Hebrew slave whom you brought to us came in to me to make sport of me. And as I raised my voice and screamed, he left his garment beside me and fled outside. Now when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spoke to him, saying, "This is what your slave did to me," his anger burned. So Joseph's master took him out and put him into jail, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. And he was there in the jail. But the Lord was with Joseph and extended kindness to him and gave him favor in the sight of the chief jailer.
So when you hear these words, that Hebrew slave whom you brought us, it puts the onus on Potiphar. Well, this is all my mistake. Apparently I didn't vet this guy good enough or something like that, right? And she says to make sport of me. What is that? What do you think that term "make sport of me" means?
Make fun.
Make fun? Yeah. It's actually along those lines, only it's really deep. It's open up to public ridicule. You know, and when somebody does something, it makes fun of somebody to the point where they start crying, you know, or something like that. It was that kind of humiliation that's involved. We're talking about. So was this a serious thing? Yeah, it was. And it was also an ethnic thing. This Hebrew is making us Egyptians look bad that you brought in. So does it put Potiphar in a pretty bad spot?
Yes,
You bet it does. You bet it does. So he has very little options, doesn't he? And she goes through the whole thing, right? I raised my voice and screamed. By the way, if you read in the Bible about that, there's a thing about that. If somebody is attacked by if a woman is attacked by a man and she doesn't scream, versus if she does scream, there's levels. So that was probably a cultural thing in most cultures that something like that happened and you didn't resist by screaming, it could be a worse situation. But she did all these things and she made sure she marked them down so that Potiphar would be on her side on this thing.
See, 1, scream.
Yeah.
2, make sure
Yep.
he left something behind.
Yep.
Check mark. 3,
And she had that proof, right?
Yeah, she did.
She right there is that garment that proves everything she said. So what was Potiphar's hands tied, if you will?
Yeah, it was.
Pretty much, but it says his anger burned too. It doesn't say why his anger burned necessarily. It might have burned because of the whole situation. It might have burned just because of Joseph. But it might have been because he had some inclination his wife was. We don't know. We
Yeah,
don't know.
well, it's not mentioned there, but the inclination is you're going to jail. I'm not going to ask you what happened. You're just going to jail.
Yeah. Yeah. It's actually better than the alternative, which would have been killing him. Have him killed.
Potiphar, there's nothing in it that Potiphar says he even questioned, tell me what happened. Why did you do this? Why did you do this type of thing? It's just, you're going to jail.
It wasn't done that way. You were a piece of
Yeah, but he was a slave, he was a piece of mark, you come and go as you
yeah,
please.
you were part of the household essentially. You could do with him as you pleased.
But on the same instance, Potiphar trusted him a whole lot.
Says that he put him in where the king's prisoners were confined. Like I said, this is the Club Med prison essentially, and he was there in jail. I love this part. I love the buts in the Bible. But the Lord was with Joseph, it says, and extended kindness to him, even in the jail. Now, it doesn't say that, but I'm saying that. And gave him favor in the sight of the chief jailer. So no matter what situation Joseph is put in, he's being blessed, even in jail. Now, nobody wants to be in jail. Nobody wants to be confined. That would be a bad thing for anybody, right? But in his situation, he is now in a situation where it doesn't look very good, does it? But think about what God did.
God had a greater purpose.
God knows what's happening. So God placed him there on purpose. We see that, don't we? It's amazing. We're going to see that later on. So anyway, Joseph was what? Joseph was what with Potiphar's household and stuff? Trustworthy, right? I think that's... So we see that Judah, was he trustworthy in the things he did with the situation in the previous? No, he wasn't. So he was untrustworthy. See if I spelled that right.
I'm watching.
He was untrustworthy, whereas he was trustworthy.
And he had to take the word of his wife over Joseph, because Joseph was a slave.
Yeah.
And even if Joseph, well, he was right, but regardless, he had to take believe his wife.
Yeah.
Period.
And especially the way everything was set up. But that was all part of the situation that God was using to put Joseph in that position where he wanted him. Isn't that amazing? So sometimes we go through things in life, folks, where we wonder, why are we going through this? We see later on, we look back, well, now I see why I was in that situation, because this happened. God used it for us. And that's a neat thing to see. So, Christians can demonstrate trust in God when falsely accused. That's kind of the subpoint for this particular part we're looking at. Trusting God was the key difference between these two brothers, Judah and Joseph. Sometimes doing the right thing does not always guarantee a positive outcome in the short term. Joseph experienced that with his brothers, and again with Potiphar's wife, right? He probably, hindsight's 20/20, probably shouldn't have did the things he did with his brother, I know, but that was all part of God's plan too, to get him sold into slavery, so then he could get into Potiphar's household, which then would allow him to get into the prison, which allowed him to do that thing that got Pharaoh's attention and put him in control of everything that saved the world. And I'm jumping ahead. Saved the entire known world at the time, right? Anyway, but can we trust God with the results? Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Okay, 3 main points. There, I got 3. Christians must consider the consequences of giving into temptation. Consequences would be, first of all, sinning against God. I don't think that's good. Right? We know that. Second point, Christians may need to flee from a situation to escape temptation. And lastly, Christians can demonstrate trust in God when falsely accused. So, and we have a Bible study activity. I'm going to have you guys do it later at home, because I ran out of time. But I do have some verses from that I asked somebody that I think set up to read those. Who has number 4?
I do, but
Which actually 4 and 5.
yeah.
I take it back. Go ahead and read those for us, please.
Hebrews 4:15. For we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with us with our weaknesses, but one who has been tempted in all things as we are, yet without sin.
And that's a reassuring thing for us as Christians, isn't it? Knowing that Christ was tempted. And if you look at Matthew 4, 1 through 11, we don't have time for those verses. That's the time of temptation that Christ went through in the wilderness. When the devil came to him, remember, after he had been fasting? Yeah. It's worth looking at, folks. So if you haven't had a chance to look at it lately, read through it. And then 2 Corinthians 10:13.
First. Well, it says first. 1 Corinthians 10:13.
Yes, sorry.
No temptation has overtaken you, but such as is common to man, and God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will provide the way to escape also, so that you will be able to endure it. I'm sorry.
No, that's great. I appreciate that. So we know that God is in charge of our lives. And if there's a situation where we're going to have to go through a time of temptation like Joseph did, that God is going to take care of us if we're faithful. And that's a good word to put there here. Joseph, was he faithful?
Yes.
He was faithful. Judah was not. So when we see this contrast, we want to be the Joseph. We don't want to be the Judah. So that's good for us as well today, right?
Amen.
Similar in our lives as well. Let's get a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, I just thank you for this contrast we see between these two brothers, Lord. We see how you had your hand upon Joseph, Lord, and that he was trustworthy. He was faithful, Lord. Lord, I just pray that you'd help us in those situations too, to be that Joseph, Lord, to have that strength of character, to not let these temptations take over in our lives, Lord, that you strengthen us in those ways. And Lord, help us to depend on your Spirit who lives within us, Lord, to conquer these temptations. Thank you in your Son's name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you very much for being here. Sorry I took a little extra time. I had to hurry a little bit, but I don't think we missed anything. And did you enjoy the
Yes.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I thought it was a good one too.
Awesome.
Hey, I missed your son Joe.
Okay,
Say hi to him for me.
I know.
And thank you for being online, folks. This is Grace Baptist Church, the Adult One Bible Study. And please stand by. Associate Pastor Lee Heeman will be bringing the message in the next hour. So look for that on the same YouTube channel. Thank you. Bye.
Matthew and Eric must both be gone.
No, Derek's upstairs.
Derek?
I don't know. I think, yeah, Derek
Derek is
Derek's not Eric.